Hello and welcome to the Food for You and the Planet podcast, brought to you by Healthy Plan Eat Online Farmers Market. I'm Dr. Rosemary Ostfeld. Together, we'll hear from leaders in environmental science, agriculture, medicine, nutrition, entrepreneurship, and more. Subscribe to hear the latest in healthy and sustainable food solutions. Today's episode features Dr. Don Huber, Professor Emeritus of Plant Pathology at Purdue University. Dr. Huber received Bachelor of Science and Master of Science degrees from the University of Idaho, a PhD from Michigan State University, and is a graduate of the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College and Industrial College of the Armed Forces. His agricultural research the past 50 years has focused on the epidemiology and control of soil-borne plant pathogens, with emphasis on microbial ecology, cultural and biological controls, and physiology of host-parasite relationships. He is author or co-author of more than 300 journal articles and 3 books. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for the opportunity to share.
How did you become interested in food and agriculture?
Well, I grew up on a farm and I like to eat. I think those are criteria that give me a right to at least judge a few things that go on around the dinner table.
I like that. That's great. What are some key facts people should know about soil health and its importance to our food system?
Well, the soil is the source of all of our minerals or most of our minerals, so that when you look at some of our agricultural practices, if we don't treat the soil properly, we don't have those minerals that are necessary for our physiology. And consequently, we're seeing a lot of deficiencies. Nutrient density in our food crops has dropped dramatically in the last 50 years because of some of our agricultural practices that have ignored the value of soil health and its direct relationship to our health through the plant. So it's critical that we maintain a healthy soil if we want to have healthy plants and healthy people and healthy animals.
What are genetically modified organisms and how are they used in our food system?
Well, genetic engineering, genetic modification is usually a term for genetic engineering, which is the changing the genetic composition or makeup of an organism, whether it's a plant or an animal or a microbe, but changing it in a way that wouldn't normally occur. So if they're moving genes in or out, or they're deleting genetic material. And we forget that in 50 years ago, our concept of genetics changed dramatically so that it's not a one gene for one function, physiological function, like we used to think it is. It's really a spatial relationship of genetic material with adjacent genetic material, so that when you delete or when you insert genetic material, you change that spatial relationship, which then changes the function of the entity and all relations that it has with other genetic material. So rather than a spreadsheet just identifying function and gene, we're really looking at a Rubik's Cube type of a relationship, or you might look at it more like when we look at tomography and some of that of the genetic code. It's more like looking at a ball of yarn and saying, okay, well, this little spot on the ball of yarn is where the gene is, but look at all the other spatial relations that you have with that, so that we don't change just one. We may say we have very precision genetic engineering, but we don't change just one gene or one function. When we change one gene, we may change as many as 14 or 1500 functions. Many of those, we have no idea what the function is really doing or what the end product is. We only focus on that small entity that we set out to change. And the consequence then is that we have no idea what the safety or toxicity of many of those proteins and entities are that are being produced.
In addition to genetically modified organisms, we've also seen a really high increase in the use of chemical pesticides and fertilizers. So, what is glyphosate, the active ingredient in weed killers such as Roundup, and how is it used?
Well, glyphosate is a very powerful ag chemical. It's a modified amino acid. The simplest amino acid is glycine, and Roundup, the active ingredient in Roundup, is glyphosate, which is just glycine with a phosphonate addition to it. And that gives us a very powerful mineral chelator. So it can tie up 10 of the 18 essential nutrients that we need for plant growth and also for us, so that they're not available for those functions. It's also a patented antibiotic, a very broad spectrum antibiotic against beneficial organisms in the soil and in our GI tract that are necessary for us to utilize minerals. So it has many functions. It was promoted as being very specific for one enzyme, the EPSPS enzyme in the shikimate pathway. That's secondary metabolism, but what we actually find is that it can shut down 291 enzymes because all of those minerals are cofactors for different enzymes. And when we have a very strong chelator or an antibiotic that is toxic to the organisms that make minerals available in the soil or in our GI tract, we find that it has a broad spectrum activity range in both of those characteristics. We're applying about almost 500 million pounds of glyphosate per acre per day in North America. The most heavy application of any pesticide that we've ever had. It can be very persistent. Half-life is given in some of the textbooks as a few months to a few years. Actually, if you get into a clay soil, it's essentially a forever chemical. There's little or no degradation. And then when a grower does everything right and gets his phosphate fertility level up for his yields and quality of his crop, it can desorb that accumulated glyphosate in the soil and kill his crop. And we've seen $1 million losses as a result of doing everything right agronomically because of the persistence of this very powerful herbicide and the extremely high levels of application that we're seeing. So about half of that glyphosate is used in agriculture, the other half in parks and recreation and forest service.
How has the use of glyphosate impacted soil health and human health?
Has a dramatic effect on causing soil dysbiosis or gut dysbiosis because of its antibiotic effect against those beneficial organisms that we rely on for nutrient availability. So it's a very dramatic change that this one compound has brought into our ecology. It's an endocrine hormone disruptor, so that if you recognize the importance of that, you see that as Pete Meyer and several others in their book, Our Stolen Future, have described it very adequately and the impact of an endocrine hormone disrupting chemical applied indiscriminately across the environment and its impact and on our future as human beings. So a lot of people in the US or in Canada have gluten intolerance. Many of those, it's not intolerance to the gluten, it's an intolerance to the glyphosate residual in the crop. So we're finding levels as high as 3 to 5,000 parts per billion glyphosate in many of our crops because they also use the Roundup or the glyphosate as a ripening agent for the grain. And this goes out just pre-harvest. The residue or the product is systemic, but it goes right into the grain that we use for a food source or a feed source for our animals. But the gluten intolerance is many times just intolerance of the glyphosate that's residual in those crops. And those levels are getting higher. They have many significant health impacts, as you're probably well aware of many of those, everything from neurological to fertility and reproduction, and just proper function from a mineral standpoint that we see for digestion.
What are ways people can minimize their exposure to glyphosate and other synthetic chemicals used in our food system?
There's not a lot of analysis for residual glyphosate in our foods. The companies don't want that known. The EPA has such high minimum residue levels that it's completely preposterous to think that you could have safe levels at the figures that they're giving. So at a tenth of a part per trillion, glyphosate is an endocrine hormone disrupting chemical. So you don't know how much is in your food. You can get Tony Mitra's book on Amazon on poison foods of North America, where he's gone through and categorized 500,000 analyses from the Canadian Food Inspection Service. But the best thing is that we can do on a general basis is organic foods. They're at least grown without the direct application of pesticides. It doesn't mean that they don't have glyphosate because it can come from drift in the air or from contaminated water or contaminated soil. Again, in a lot of our soils, it's a forever chemical. It's not, unless you do something to remediate it. The organisms that break down glyphosate aren't common in many of our soils, so it just keeps accumulating rather than being degraded. If it is degraded, most of it goes to the first metabolite, would be AMPA, just one carbon short of the full glyphosate, but it's 1.5 times more toxic than the glyphosate is. And that's where it very often just stops. So that in determining what your glyphosate toxicity level is, we use the term total effective glyphosate equivalent, TEG, and that's 1.5 times the AMPA plus the residual glyphosate. Again, to avoid that, you need to have some idea of how your food is grown. And organic is, as a general statement, usually at least 160 to 200 times less lower levels than we find in most of our conventional crops and products. A good garden is a wonderful way to not only gain some experience and appreciation for growing things, but also a way to know what's used and what's in your food. There are certification programs, but not widely accepted yet, that would identify the actual level of glyphosate.
Is there any way that people can remove glyphosate from their system once they've consumed food that has glyphosate residue on it?
Yes, Dr. Monica Kruger found that with chronic botulism, that was an epidemic in Europe, that if she would put about a pint of raw sauerkraut juice per ton of feed in for the animals, that it would cure their chronic botulism problem that was costing her mortality for many of the dairy cows, especially. Raw sauerkraut juice contains an organism, Lactobacillus plantarum, that is one of the few organisms compatible in the soil that can degrade glyphosate all the way to water and carbon dioxide. There are a number of other organisms that can do that in the laboratory, but they don't do it in the soil and don't do it in our gut very well. Lactobacillus is one that does. There are several other bacillus species that can be used as a probiotic. Humic acid and a zeolite clinoptilolite combination will kind of capture glyphosate in the body and remove it in the feces then, rather than having it go through the kidneys. The importance of that shift is that when we have a lot of glyphosate as a strong mineral chelator, taking those minerals through the kidneys, that it plugs it up and we end up with end-stage kidney failure. In Central America, 1 out of 4 sugarcane workers is dying from end-stage kidney failure because of the glyphosate that's used in sugarcane production as a desiccant before harvest. I've been involved in a project where we developed a nutritional ripening program to get rid of the glyphosate and also improve the nutrient density of the sugarcane as it's harvested. We can increase yields 8 to 9% and not increase the cost of the overall production, actually lower production cost. But when glyphosate goes through the kidneys, it plugs them up, and end-stage kidney failure is very common in countries where they use glyphosate as a ripening agent, is similar to what we do. So to detoxify, you can go the probiotic route, and that's more for the direct ingestion of your foods that you're eating, consuming right now. For a longer term removal, it would be the humic and fulvic acid mixture with the clinoptilolite as a general way to move it, and to move it again through the feces, through the liver, rather than through the kidneys.
Thank you. That's very helpful to understand how people can reduce the load of glyphosate they might have in their system. You served as an agricultural program specialist for the U.S. Department of Agriculture National Plant Disease Recovery System. What type of work did you do in that role, and why is it important for there to be understanding about the causes of plant disease and ways to recover from it?
Well, as Napoleon said, an army moves on its stomach. A society moves on its stomach. And anything that disrupts the availability of food, because that's our source of nutrition, is going to impact everything else that a society does. Agriculture is the basic infrastructure of any society. So what happens in agriculture determines how many doctors you have, how many school teachers you have, how many vacation days you have, so that you're not out grubbing out an existence. We also find that it's important from keeping an army moving. Napoleon's statement is very real. In World War I, the Germans wanted to shift from the Eastern Front over to the Western Front a year before they were able to, because of the potato famine that was going through Europe. And the soldiers were so demoralized with the letters from home of family members that were dying from starvation because of the impact of that one disease. We see, there are 30 million people that died with the rice blast disease in Asia, also just because they didn't have the food to sustain themselves. There are a lot of ways that a new disease can come into an area. We monitor those. We have our plant diagnostic networks, and we monitor the vulnerability of our crops to new varieties or new strains of the pathogens. Trying to keep one or two steps ahead of the evolution of virulence and those things that take place, because it is such a critical component. Agriculture, again, is basic infrastructure of our society. So that the purpose of the committee there was to follow and keep abreast of disease incidents and occurrence anywhere in the world. So as we would see a rust strain or a new rust that would be attacking wheat in Kenya or in Europe or Australia, we wanted to make sure that we had varieties that would be resistant to that, because those organisms can move with the wind. It only takes 5 days for dust to move from China to the United States. And you can have organisms moving in commerce So that our purpose was a carryover from the biological warfare programs where we were monitoring diseases throughout the world and keeping abreast of what our vulnerabilities were as far as resistance and chemical controls. I just returned from Brazil, and there's a lot of concern for the resistance of soybean rust organism, a fungal organism, becoming resistant to all of the chemicals that we use as fungicides. Well, for Brazil, soybeans is 25% of their total economy. And so if you have total crop failure, which this disease can cause, it has an impact again throughout everything else that's going to be done in that economy. So our assignment or our mission was to make sure that we understood the change in disease occurrence, identify any new diseases, black dot in Florida, or witch's broom in cacao and coffee or in chocolate. In Brazil, on the witch's broom disease, in 2 years it took Brazil from the #1 chocolate producing country in the world to #3, which was a long drop from #1. They still haven't fully recovered from that, in spite of all the work on manipulation or fungicide and chemical controls, modifying the environment, and all of those other tools. There's still tremendous loss from it. So I had the privilege, actually, for about 40 years of being involved one way or another. Ended up, my final assignment was as chairman of that committee. When we would see a new disease, we would assemble a scientific panel as quickly as possible and develop a pathways analysis for recovery should it come in, and then also making sure that our vulnerability was as low as possible.
What are some of your favorite highlights of your career so far?
Well, I've spent a lot of time, started out as kind of curiosity, but looking at nutrient disease interactions. Excuse me. On my master's degree, I was asked what I expected to accomplish. And I said, I want to understand why crop rotation has such a dramatic effect on disease. And then following that question, it turns out that it's related to the nutrient availability for the subsequent crop. And so I've seen that develop. We can see that the virulence of our organisms is by modifying nutrient availability and its function in the plant. We see that if we can maintain nutrient sufficiency, we can control many diseases. And when we look at the symptoms of disease, we're really looking in many cases, looking at nutrient deficiency symptoms. You look at sudden death syndrome on soybeans, it costs us up to $1 billion a year in lost soybeans. XP Yang at Iowa State reported that we have a simple seed treatment with manganese and magnesium to replenish those nutrients that are tied up by the organism, that we can completely control that disease. So a very simple return, but seeing that relationship and then seeing many of our growers accepting those differences or those interactions and seeing the great success that we're having.
How can society shift from the use of synthetic chemicals in our food system to one that is more environmentally sustainable?
Well, we have a whole generation, almost two generations, that doesn't know how to farm without chemicals. 50 years ago, we didn't have all of these choices. Most of our chemical agriculture came after World War II with leftover military entities that were looking for a market, and some of them are fertilizers, other and others were made good insecticides and that. But we have a lot of tools, but we've forgotten how to use them, both for weed control, for nutrition, and general function. The tools are there. The chemicals have offered us a simplified way to uh, farm, and so that's the way we've done it. It's a chemical agriculture, it's a costly product, both from the input that's required and also the controls with the patenting process that, excuse me, go along with that. Uh, Education is probably the biggest factor that's involved. We see farmers like Rick Clark and many others that are large farmers that very uh, very productive in their totally organic production on 500 or 1,000 acres. So that we have examples that are there that where they use the other tools in the toolbox and are able to maintain a very excellent agricultural program. But it requires greater management skills and therefore better education in order to use those and get the ecology of farming really working smoothly. It's a transition that requires that education. We used to call it crop rotation. We now call it regenerative agriculture. It's kind of a step from organic, but uh, we need to make that other step if we're going to have sustainability in our production and also the nutrient density that we need for health of our society.
What do you see as the future of healthy and environmentally sustainable food?
I don't think we have any choice. You look at in your area as a doctor, and you see the end product. It's not a favorable situation for any society to see the level of disease, and especially in our children. It's You're starting right out with the whole next generation that's compromised, and we really don't have any alternative except to change. We can't keep applying 500,000,000 pounds of glyphosate, and if it's not glyphosate, it'll be a sister compound, glufosinate or paraquat or one of those. We just can't continue because the health costs are so critical and dynamic that we have to change. We'll see a greater peace in our society when we get the health back and the opportunities back in that regard. So,
Thank you. Is there anything else that you would like to share?
well, I'm at my stage in life. I feel like it's been a blessing to make it this far, but a tremendous blessing to see the changes that are coming. I have great hopes for the future. I think we're just starting to see what can be done. We sometimes jump on our new innovations before we fully realize all their implications, and it's kind of one step forward and two steps back at times, but we see that progress. I admire our current producers for the risks they're willing to take and their willingness to change. I think they see the handwriting on the wall, and it's a great future ahead of us. We can get the politics straightened out. I think we'll see progress at such a great level that we can't even dream about things that in 10 years will be common practice for us. It's not just AI, but it's everything that is involved in our interactions is also an opportunity for us to grow and to be more productive and more civil.
Thank you so much, Professor Huber, for your knowledge, for your hope, for your inspiration, and all of the work that you've done on sustainable agriculture and food systems. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate you letting me share a little bit here. I think another thing that I have that's been fun to see is we do have a way now with raw sauerkraut juice or with the organisms that are involved in degradation. We can get rid of the residual glyphosate in the soil. We can get back to healthy soils and a healthy living and nutrient dense foods. So that appreciate the opportunity to share some of that and your persistence in taking on this topic. It's a topic that some people wouldn't want to handle, but I admire and appreciate your willingness to address the issue. It's such a critical issue for us. So thank you.
Thank you, Professor Huber.
Okay, best wishes.